Hey there, how are you doing? So a friend of mine just asked me to take some photos for his Airbnb here in Dublin. So I thought I would bring you along with me so we can talk about some real estate or interiors photography or whatever it is that you want to call, and we can introduce this new concept in here to the channel. So let's check out the place, make sure everything is organized and ready to go, and let's get started. So as you could see, it's a quite nice Airbnb. It has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It has all this wide open space. One of the rooms has a lot of toys and there's a lot of books and guides of what to do in Ireland. But what I really want to show is this massive living room, because it's just great. That's something you just don't find very often in Dublin. So I want to make sure that when people are looking through the Airbnb website, they see this space that we are right now. Before we start shooting, I want to go through the kind of gear that I'll be using for the shoot. And the gear that you need for interiors or real estate photography, it's actually quite simple. It's 1 camera, 1 lens, and just 2 accessories. And 2 accessories. So the first accessory that we're going to be using is obviously a tripod, and this is an essential for this kind of photography because we're going to be using HDR or exposure restacking. I'm going to come back to this topic later on because there's things for us to do before we get there, but a tripod is a must. I'll be shooting everything on my Canon 90D as always. And for lens, I'm going to be using a 16-35 2.8, but I'm not going to be shooting on 2.8, and I'll tell you why later. But the point is that we're going to be using a wide angle lens. And the final accessory we're going to be using is a polarizer filter that we're going to screw in front of the lenses, and this is going to be used to cut the reflections and the glare from windows and especially from wooden floor. When the light hits directly the wooden floor, it gets that glare, so we can cut it off by using one of these guys. Now that we have the gear set up, it's time for us to walk around the house, turn on all the lights, make sure there's no mess anywhere. If there's any mess, if there's anything that needs to be moved, it is much easier to move now than to wait and move that in Photoshop later. So go around the house, make sure everything is in place, make sure everything is ready to be shot. If your client asks you for something specific, make sure you note what he was talking about now and possibly start from there, just because you don't want to forget that. I know I already said how great this Airbnb is, but have a look at this view. Okay, now that we are ready to start shooting, all the lights are on, we double checked everything, we know everything we have to shoot. The first thing we have to think of is the height that we want the camera to be on. We don't want the camera to be looking down, or we don't want the camera to be looking up. We want the camera to look straight on. If we have the camera looking up like it is right now, then all the lines in the corners, in the walls, they're all gonna be like this because we're using such a wide angle that all the lines start to distort in this direction instead of being like this. And the same happens if we're shooting down to something. So if we put the tripod too high and we shoot down to something, then all the lines, instead of being straight on, they're gonna be distorted this way. So ideally what we want is the level of the camera to be just straight on. And that's usually about chest high. Well, my chest high at least. Actually, I had to change my lens because the 16-35 wasn't wide enough for a crop sensor camera. So what I'm using now is a 10-18, which is the widest lens that I have. But I don't really like shooting in 10, so I'm gonna try to keep it at least 14. And the final tip before we take the first photo is to make sure that we are shooting leveled. We want the photo to come out of the camera the most perfect as we can already, before we even getting into the edit. So on top of the geometry, getting the lines straight, let's try to get in camera the horizon line straight as well. So you can either use a tripod bubble if your tripod has the bubble, but the best thing is actually just use the leveler of the camera. So if you look at the back screen of the camera now, you can see the two lines are green, which means the camera understands that it's leveled. So we are ready for the first shot. Okay, so in this last shot that I just showed you, the idea was to show that the kitchen was connected to the living room. But if you notice in the edges of the photo, you can see that wall over there, and you can also see just this door over here. The idea is to always try to include 3 walls. By showing the edge of this door here and the edge of that wall over there, what I gave my viewer was the idea of perspective, of the distance, not distance, the length of this wall behind me. This was the frame that I shot. But if I remove this corner here, if I remove this door and I move the camera to the left, what happens is we lose the idea of how was the size of this wall here, because you can't see the end of it now. You want to give the viewer of the photo the perspective, the idea of how big this wall is, how far it goes. So the shooting idea in the kitchen is a little bit different. What I really want to show in the kitchen is that the family that will be staying here will have everything they need to cook their meals. For example, you have the basic ingredients, you have a coffee maker, you have a kettle, microwave, a stove and an oven and a fridge. So that's what I want to show regarding the kitchen, not the magnitude of the kitchen, but what the kitchen is equipped with. That's what people that will be renting the Airbnb will be looking for, really. Okay, even being the fact that I only want to show what the kitchen has, I am still fitting the 3 walls that I mentioned on the topic before. So I'm showing this wall here, I'm showing the back wall, and I'm showing that wall. So that will give perspective to whoever's looking at this photo saying, okay, that's a small kitchen. Kitchen done. I had to get a little bit creative with the camera angle because there's a mirror just there and I really don't want to get the camera in the mirror. I only got 2 shots, one from there, one from here. I just realized now that I never mentioned my camera settings to you. So this is also something very important. You need to have a camera that you can shoot manual mode. Or in this case, what I am actually using is aperture priority mode. The shutter speed is being controlled by the camera itself because it is shooting on aperture priority mode. From the aperture, I'm using between f8 and f11, maybe 13, 14, depending on the place. If I need a larger part of the image to be in focus, I will use 14, but no more than that. Usually between f8 and f11 is a sweet spot for all the lenses. ISO, I am keeping it at 100 because I'm shooting on the tripod, so I'm compensating the lack of light with a longer time of exposure. I am shooting 3 photos at a time for an exposure bracket, which I'm still gonna talk about it later on because that's something very important for this kind of photography. I'm using manual focus and I'm also using manual white balance just to get all the photos on the same temperature. As I mentioned before, I am using a 2-second timer, so to avoid any camera shake. And last but not least, I am shooting in RAW because there's no point of shooting JPEG in 2023 anymore. So this part is done. Bedroom time. Actually, I decided to shoot the second room before I shoot the main bedroom, just because I want to talk about angles. You don't always have to go and shoot from the corners. The 2 best angles to shoot on real estate actually is from the corners is one of them, and the second one is to do a head-on shot. So that's basically what I'm gonna do on this bedroom. I still want to get 1, 2, 3 walls to show the depth of the room, but I don't want to shoot from the corner because it doesn't really work on this bedroom here. So what I'm looking for when I'm doing this head-on shot is different composition rules. So in this case, for example, it's a small room, there's not much you can do. So the minimum I want to do is to be symmetrical. Now that window there, that's not symmetrical, so that doesn't really help, but at least the lamp is. So I'm gonna use the lamp as my guide to have it central in the frame, and then try to get the 2 walls with the same amount of space on both sides. So as we get to the last room to shoot, I think this is the moment to talk about the exposure bracket, or HDR. As you noticed, I am taking 3 photos every time I take a photo. One of them is a darker exposure, one of them is a neutral exposure, and the other one is a brighter exposure. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the exact same photos in different shutter speeds to make a darker one, a brighter one, and a middle one. What is the point? If I expose for the interior, I am most likely gonna blow out all the highlights from the sky from the outside. And if I expose for the outside, I will most likely have a very dark image in here. So in the moment that I have the 3 exposures, I can then put them on Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever different app that you use and merge them into HDR. A HDR that basically means high dynamic range. So this is not the only way to expose for the interior and the exterior at the same time. You can also use artificial light to illuminate the inside and then just take one exposure. But I would say this is the easiest way, since you just put it on your software and it is going to merge the photos on its own, and it does a pretty good job. So if we look at the last shot that we just took, you can see the highlights outside in the sky and on the lamp are pretty much blown up. But in here you have all the details of the natural light and everything. And then if you go to the next photo, this is the darker one. And you can see you have all the details from the sky, and you also have the details from most of the lamp. And the next one, that will be the neutral photo. And once you take these 3 photos and you merge them into your whatever software you want to use, they're gonna look like this. So since we were talking just now about merging different photos and stacking them into a single photo, what we can also do is to make a panorama photo. Since I have all the shots that I needed to be done already done and I still have a couple of minutes, I'm gonna try to make a panorama here on the living room, literally showing the entire space. And then I'm gonna stack this again in Lightroom using the panorama tools. The only difference is that here I'm not gonna be using 3 stacked photos every panorama, because that would just be too much. This kind of photography can open a lot of doors to start making money with photography. You can offer this kind of services to hotels to shoot their rooms and lobbies. Also, usually bars and restaurants have a kind of private area where they rent for private functions, and they always need to have good quality photographs to show potential customers what the space looks like and if it's going to be a good fit for the client. Also, there's new houses going to the market every single day, and if you can get a contract with a real estate agency, they will probably supply you a lot of work. In general, it is always good to know these tips. For example, the HDR is a technique that I had to use back in Scotland to take one of my favorite photos. If I had exposed that photo just for the sky, the rocks would be completely black. If I had exposed for the rocks, the sky would be completely blown up. So that is something that I had to do in that moment. So this kind of tips, they can be used in different situations as well. So if you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, make sure to leave the like, comment if you want to see how I added these photos, because I wasn't really planning to make another video, but if you feel like you want this small tutorial of how to make the HDR and potentially the panoramic as well, if that worked, I'm not sure, I haven't seen yet. But if you want me to make a tutorial, just make sure you let me know in the comments. As usual, that's it for me. Thank you for staying here. Thank you for watching another video, and I will see you in the next one.